Resistance, a tale of the clans of the Dark Masque. Rutheras gazed at the sunset, enraptured by its beauty, and haunted by the knowledge that it was the last sunset she would ever see in totality. Desperate to preserve its warm tones of rose, gold, and orange in her mind, she stared as though entranced. The Bones were a nomadic clan that traveled constantly. From a young age, Rutheras had become accustomed to moving from one place to another, from North Africa to Asia Minor, and back again. Rutheras herself was Moroccan and Saudi, a tall girl with dusky skin and deep brown eyes. It was her 18th birthday, and since she had not been chosen to be among the tribe's birthing humans, tonight the ceremony that turned her into a Night Stalker, as the Bones called themselves, so named for the matriarch of the clan who cast the bones to see into the future. Rutheras was afraid. Surrounded by humans and vampires alike from birth, she nevertheless regarded the vampire bones as monsters. She did not want to be a monster, she thought, as the sun dipped below the horizon, as though eager to bring about Rutheras' vampirehood as quickly as it could. "It is not all bad, Rutheras," came a voice from her side. Her mother's voice. Her mother had been among the birthing folk for the clan until after she had had Rutheras. "How can you say that, Mama?" said Rutheras, not taking her eyes from the sunset. "We kill to survive." Her mother, Hafetza, sighed and seated herself beside her. The sun was gone from the sky, and now only colored clouds remained in the west. "You have such strange ideas, Rutheras," said Hafetza. Her name meant caretaker in Arabic, a fact that had always amused and embittered her daughter. Hafetza cared for little besides blood and hedonistic pleasures, a quality that Rutheras did not share. "Where did you come by such humane logic?" "There are other humans here, Mother," responded Rutheras. "None that share your beliefs," Hafetza shot back. "We are all embracing of, or at the very least, resigned to, our fate." Rutheras sighed. She knew that her thoughts on vampiric society were not shared, and she had never met vampires beyond those of her clan. Her name meant Dark One, but like her mother, she did not live up to it. "There must be others, Mother." "None that you will ever meet," said Hafetza more gently. "The Bones keep to their own." Rutheras sighed and nodded. "Come, we must prepare you for tonight." Hafetza took her daughter's hand, and Rutheras allowed her mother to help her to her feet. Her mother, in a rare gesture of affection, took Rutheras' face in her hands. "Remember that you will not bear the mark of vampire alone," said Hafetza. "We are here to help you." Rutheras, surprised by her mother's display, only nodded. Karim leaped to his feet as he saw Rutheras approach. A young vampire with a strong but lithe build, he and Rutheras had played together as children and become close friends as they aged. He was 2 years older, and after he had been turned, he had gone to the clan matriarch and asked to be the giver at Rutheras' own turning ceremony. The matriarch, surprised but amused, had granted him the right. Rutheras herself did not seem surprised, something that still bewildered him. He knew she had never wanted to become a vampire, but she had little choice in the matter. Not because she was a girl, but because tradition dictated much of the Bones' lives, and the matriarch restricted social involvement with non-members in the interest of preserving those traditions. Hafetza gave the young man a nod as she approached. He returned the gesture, and then turned his eyes to Rutheras. She looked at him blankly. "I am taking her to be prepared," said Hafetza briskly. "You should do the same." Karim quirked his mouth. Hafetza and he had never been close. She cared little for her daughter, and the whole tribe knew it. Once Rutheras was turned, she would be out of Hafetza's hair, and that's just the way she wanted it. Of all the Bones, Hafetza was one of the most vampiric in soul as well as body. The women continued on, leaving Karim to his dark thoughts. Hafetza and her vampiric companions bathed Rutheras carefully. They dressed her in a black silk gown that left her neck and upper chest exposed, and a sheer black veil, both beaded with silver. A tall girl with a slender figure, clear and glowing brown skin, and piercing brown eyes, she was striking in the costume they garbed her in. She wore no makeup or jewelry, although her mother pressed them on her. "Do you not want to look your best?" said Hephaestus. "Beauty is a reflection of the self," said Rutheras. "I do not want to look like other than what I am about to become." Hephaestus blinked at her daughter. Although Rutheras was highly intelligent, rarely had she heard anything so philosophical leave Rutheras' lips. Shrugging, she half smiled. "As you wish," she said resignedly, and escorted her daughter from the tent to the ceremonial pavilion that had been erected for the first time in over a year. The entire clan splinter had gathered, as was traditional, to witness the conversion. Rutheras blanched for a moment. Although she had been told since childhood of the rites of conversion, she suddenly did not want anyone to witness her own. She struggled to formulate reasons why she felt this way, barely explainable even to herself, never mind to anyone else. It was as if, and this was the nearest she could come to placing her feelings into words, she felt that if the clan witnessed her conversion, they would be witnessing at the same time the corruption of her own soul. Amidst these dark thoughts, she caught sight of Karim. Although his expression was largely one of seriousness, he smiled encouragingly at her, which lifted, a very, very little, the darkness from her mind. Rutheras barely noticed as the matriarch intoned the rites, noticed even less when her attendants lifted the veil from her head. The only thing she would recall vividly, after that night, was when Karim stepped forward, took her in his arms, and lowering his mouth to her veins pulsing with red human blood, gave her the dark kiss that would drain all her humanity away forever. The early days she hardly recalled. She drank and consumed, slept, drank and consumed some more. Karim had to comfort her when she cried over the bones of the humans she consumed, for she was unable to stop herself from taking nearly every ounce of flesh off the skeletons of her human prey. This was the curse of their clan. They not only took the blood, but the flesh as well, and it was rare that they could stop themselves, for which reason conversion was so dangerous for those being converted. It was also the reason the bones fed as little as possible on humans, supplementing their human prey with beasts of the field, not for any particular desire to protect the humans, but for the difficulty their condition caused. The clan as a whole were masterful undertakers, utilizing a variety of burial techniques to disappear the remains of their prey to avoid suspicion, even while on the move. She brooded about the pavilion, muttering, until finally Karim went to the matriarch and demanded that Rutheras be examined by someone. "By whom?" asked Delonda. "A doctor? A head witch? By whom?" Mother Delonda was endlessly skeptical of medicine, particularly psychiatrists, whom she called head witches. An ancient creature of better than 700 annuals, she nevertheless bore an endlessly youthful skin, clear brown eyes, and long silky black hair that cascaded over her back and shoulders like a shawl. Only her eyes betrayed her age, for while they were clear and bright, they showed significant age, like the eyes of a stridently healthy human centenarian placed in the body of an adolescent. "Anyone," said Karim desperately. "No one has ever responded this badly to the change. She is dying inside, although she is deathless without." Delonda considered. She and Rutheras had never been terribly close, but Hephaestus and she had been good friends before her conversion, and subsequently, Mother Delonda kept an eye on Hephaestus' progeny. Rutheras she regarded as a favored niece, and although she did not outwardly show it, Karim's words disturbed her deeply. "I must cast," she murmured, and sent everyone, her attendants and Karim, out of the tent. Drawing a silk bag from a chest, she drew the polished bones from it and cast them forth upon the mahogany table at which she sat. Her eyes widened as she stared, and she left the tent. Once outside, she lifted her head to gaze at Karim, who was unsettled by the intensity in her ancient eyes. "Bring her to me," said Mother Delonda. "She will spell our end." Karim hastened back to the common ground, where Rutheras had been muttering to the moon. He found not a trace of her. Rutheras left off running and paused, smelling the air. Somehow, although it was many miles away, she could smell the city of Rabat and the great sea beyond. Now that she was a vampire, she could run many times faster than her human kin, and she knew she would make the city before dawn. Her eyes bright with moonlight, she sped off towards the waiting city, her still veins howling with the need for food. "She is gone," cried Karim to Mother Delonda. "I know not where." Delonda slumped into a chair. For once, she did not know what to do. She did not want to hunt after the girl as though she were a criminal, but the bones had foreseen a terrible fate for all of the clan if she were not found. What it wasn't clear to her, but any dark fate was to be devoutly unwished, even for Night Stalkers. "Put together a hunting party. Find her," commanded Delonda. Karim nodded and left her tent. "You there," called a voice in stilted Arabic into the cloud of Rutheras' thoughts. She turned to look at a young man with fair hair and skin, an odd sight to see in these lands indeed. "What?" she asked. "You should come with me," he said. "Dawn is near." She stared at him. Somehow she knew he was another Night Stalker, and somehow he also knew what she was. He was not of her clan, this she knew. But she knew he would know where to find shelter in this strange city. But she could not bring herself to move. Making the decision for her, he took her hand and led her away. Rutheras allowed herself to be led, thinking, "It no longer matters if I live or die. I did not want this life. If he wants to kill me, so be it." "And are you certain of their location?" he asked Rutheras later. Rutheras nodded. This young man, named Philip Heath, was of the adversary clan, Night Stalkers that hunted witches and casters, vampire and human alike. Philip had brought her to the court of the regent of Rabat, Hassan Rami, where he was a guest. He had brought Rutheras directly to his private quarters rather than having her present herself, however. Apparently, a splinter of the adversary clan was in northern Africa hunting her very own clan. The betrayal came from her lips as easily as a drop of water leaped from the sea and troubled her but little, if at all. "I want to be there," said Rutheras, and these words surprised her. "I want to be there to see them die." Philip looked at her, a little surprised, but readily agreed. "Very well. Be ready at midnight tonight. In the meantime, stay here." Rutheras nodded and lay down to sleep on the comfortable chaise provided to her as Philip pulled the heavy curtains against the coming light, if only to dull the pangs of hunger that had beset her yet again. Afterward, when she thought of it in the few hours before dawn, it should have been horrifying, but it wasn't. As she watched hidden, as her mother was dragged from her tent, shackled and bleeding, she should have been horrified, or at least sad, but she wasn't. As she watched the nomadic compound burn and the ashes of her kin, her mother, Karim, everyone, rise to the stars, she felt nothing but a curiously calm relief. The humans were let to run, and run they did, fleeing into the night with what little they could carry. It troubled her that she did not see Delonda. She wandered through the camp and squatted down by the remains of one of the bodies, let the embers and ashes sift through her fingers. Feeling a presence beside her, she looked up to see Philip. "Because you led us to them, I will leave you with your life," Philip said softly. "But know that every other one of your clan must die for their horrific consumption of human flesh, if for no other reason that they endanger the conspiracy that binds all clans together." Rutheras laughed, and it was a harsh sound in her throat. "I didn't want this life, adversary. I will choose another path." He nodded, and made his way out of the camp with the rest of his team, with only one backward glance at the mad girl who sat upon the grasses with ashes in her hands, staring at the moon. When dawn came, she did not move from that spot, but to stand. She watched the horizon glow, beginning to sear her eyes with the coming brightness. And when the sun rose, she faced it, her eyes aglow, as she laughed and laughed and laughed.